It was not an accident that they decided not to put on their equipment that would have only cost $500,000. It was not an accident. It was not an accident that Halliburton were the last people to leave the rig before it blew up. So there are many, many anomalies here that lead us to the same conclusion that it was no accident. Therefore, since it was not an accident, the question is, who benefits? We always must ask this question, who benefits? Well, we know that the papacy, in its control of China and its control of Russia and its control of the Islamic Sunni world, is planning an invasion of the American Southeast. And I cover this in my book. That is why Jimmy Carter and the Congress gave the Panama Canal locks to Panama, which later then leased out its running to a red Chinese company called Hutchison Whampoa. So the Chinese run the locks in Panama, and they're building a huge new Panama Canal there that will be finished, according to their estimates, in 1215. The Chinese are manning the locks, the red Chinese. Second of all, you have the Bahamas, which is the largest container shipping port in the Eastern Hemisphere for the most part, and China is there in the Bahamas. China is manning all the intelligence in Cuba, because you see, Cuba was given to Jesuit communist Fidel Castro to serve as a staging base for the invasion of America way back in 1960. That's why it was given to him. That's why Allen Dulles made sure that the Bay of Pigs fiasco failed. So we have this encirclement policy of China. Right now, China's going into Jamaica. My black Jamaican friends tell me that lots of young Chinese there taking all their jobs. So we have this going on. Now you have Russia with a submarine and a couple of big bombers out of Venezuela. They have their encirclement movement, and with this oil spill, I believe that if it continues, there will be a mandatory evacuation of the southeast coast. And when they evacuate those people out of the southeast coast, say, 250 miles in, you now have a clear... You now can invade because you have nobody to resist you. Remember, especially those Southerners, those Mississippians and Alabamans, they're all armed to the teeth. Mm-hmm. So we got to get those people out of the way to have a successful invasion base. That's one advantage. Another advantage is, remember, the BP is controlled by the Knights of Malta, specifically Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands. She owns Royal Dutch Shell, which is a part of British Petroleum, and you have Queen Elizabeth II, who's a Dame of Malta. Both of them Bilderbergers, by the way. And so they have orchestrated this for this particular reason. And Juan Carlos is involved in this, too, and he is presently using his company of Centro to build the Trans-Texas Corridor, I-69, through Mexico to the U.S. and to Canada. And that will only happen with military protection. For that to happen, U.S. has to invade Mexico. There has to be a reason to invade Mexico. Maybe the oil spill will serve as that reason.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't know when there's an end to that. I mean, we don't even know how much is flowing out of that, what they may even consider I call it a volcanic eruption of oil under the sea that is now, I know recent NASA photos, and some of them haven't even been allowed to be released. They've now claimed this to be a national security incident that I've read about. Claimed that the spill is even larger than the state of Florida itself.
Well, it's no doubt going to be used to justify martial law. I mean, Joe Biden sent SWAT teams to every offshore rig in the country now. Why did he send a SWAT team? Why didn't he send investigators? Mm-hmm. What they're going to do, they're going to nationalize the oil. Oil will be nationalized, just like they nationalized the banks, just like they nationalized the auto industry. They're going to nationalize oil, and this is part and parcel of a fascist government. Fascism is always the unification between the cartel capitalists and the government of that country that these very same white cartel capitalists control.
Now let's move over to the other borders in Mexico. Let's move over to Mexico and talk about what's happening there in your recent research. How is that movement also, the illegal alien situation, creating a weakness in that part of our country, in the West?
Okay, this has been a design by the Jesuit order to Catholicize our southwestern border since 1876. And this is documented by Richard W. Thompson in his great work, The Papacy and the Civil Power, written in 1876. And so with this Jesuit design of bringing all these lower-class Mexicans into the country, the Jesuits in Mexico are making sure they're leaving, and the Jesuits here are making sure they're coming in. And the staging base for coming into the U.S. is the Jesuit stronghold of Arizona. And I posted something about this recently. There's called the San Xavier Mission near Nogales. It's not too far from the Mexican border. And this is where I believe the Jesuits with their stronghold, set up by Eusebio Kino, who is considered to be the father of the cattle country, the Jesuits are orchestrating this huge invasion through Arizona, and it will not stop. In fact, they've now incited more of this through a good piece of legislation that was signed by the governor there. But the Jesuits control her just like they control Arnold Schwarzenegger in California. The same Jesuit California provincial controls the California governor, the Arizona governor, the Hawaiian governor, and I believe the Nevada governor. He controls that particular region of his province. So what they've done is now they have brought in all these alien Catholic Mexican invaders, which are soldiers. They bring in their flag. They plant their flags at the post office, at the public schools, demanding this and that. They have no intention of being American. They want to reclaim the Southwest, claiming that it was taken from them illegally. And this is part of the Mecha Aslan rhetoric. So with this now, they have got the agitation with the Mexicans. Now they've got the agitation with the good bill that was passed by all the whites now being driven into their corner. And so now we have the perfect place now to have a race war. And when this race war starts, I maintain they're going to ignite the black on white race war. At the same time, they ignite the Latino on white race war. This will then drive all the whites to desperation. Adolf Hitler will come to power. Northcom, NORAD, Department of Homeland Security will spring into action. Blackwater will be with them, which is run by the Knights of Malta. And then they will come to the rescue and solve the problem. And here we'll have no constitution and be under martial law. And that's the purpose for the Mexican invasion. That's why Janet Napolitano doesn't want to stop. That's why George Bush didn't want to stop. That's why Barry Davis Obama didn't want to stop. It's absolutely necessary to bring America to fascist martial law to have this alien Mexican Roman Catholic and even Islamic invasion, because there are many Muslims there too.
Yeah, and they can use Arizona as a powder keg here by creating this type of strong legislation supposedly against illegal aliens.
Yeah, why didn't they do it 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Why didn't they do it 25 years ago when it was starting to happen? They waited until they have 40 million of them in the country. Now we'll pass this legislation. Now we can foment domestic insurrection and rebellion. And all the Mexicans you see, every last one of them is going to the concentration camps. That's why I tell you, Mexican people, you need to leave this country. You need to get back to Mexico as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you, what's your research centered on in the last weeks or so? What's been on your mind lately, and what have you been talking about on your radio show a lot?
I talked about George Allen, who was the past governor of Virginia. He was also a U.S. senator from Virginia. And what he did was, he was to be really the foremost Republican candidate against Obama. Well, he was credible. He did many good things. But he was given an order. And that order was to call an Eastern Indian who was born in Virginia, to call him a macaca. A macaca is like using the term nigger or something like that, to deliberately incite the listener, and he would then come under attack. He used the term macaca twice, deliberately. When he used this term macaca, then everybody came out and said, what are you doing using this name? And then it turns out that his mother was living in North Africa, and she had learned this term because this was the term used for the black Congolese during the days of King Leopold II, and it was also a term used for East Indians that come here called the macaca effect, that the East Indians take jobs that rightfully should be Americans. So when he used this term macaca twice on video, that completely caused him to lose the U.S. Senate race with, I believe the man was Mr. Webb, Greg Webb. And so the Democrat won the U.S. Senate seat for Virginia, one of them, and that threw a majority Democratic vote in the Senate so that they could pass what Obama-Biden want. The second thing is he was to be the presidential nominee for the Republican Party. In 2006, in December, he withdraws because of this term that he used, and now he's not really fit to run. And that ensured that they would have that decrepit loser John McCain that would ensure an Obama-Biden victory, at least in appearance. So I maintain this George Allen. And he now has what's called the Friends of George Allen. You can Google it. And it has 300 of the most powerful men you ever want to see. It's got Bill